Hello, food safety friends, and welcome to edition 11 of Food Safety Fridays, your weekly webinar program from the IFSQN. Well, you're in for a treat today, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Britta Ball with us today, Principal Consultant from Advancing Food Safety Culture. Britta's going to be talking about how to make training effective. She's going to give us some tips on that. Though many of us are involved with designing, planning, delivering training to our employees, or sourcing training for external trainers, etc. And also partaking in training as an attendee. What we want to do, we want to get best bang for our buck and have the outcomes and the behaviour changes that we want. And I've been working with Britta this week on a presentation, and it's absolutely brilliant. You're going to really enjoy it today. As I say every week, it's free to attend this, and we have sponsors that support us in this: Safe Food 360, Trace Analytics, FSSC, and IFS. And we're very grateful for them, for supporting us with this and helping us to bring this to you as an educational tool every week. I can see Britta's there now. I'll just pop over to Britta and say hello. Welcome, Britta. Nice to see you.
Hi, Simon. Thanks.
Whereabouts are you, Britta? Just remind me where you are.
I'm in Canada, near Toronto, in Guelph, near the University of Guelph, which has a large food science department.
Brilliant. And you're looking great today. I can see the sign behind you there. Food safety culture doesn't what? Sorry,
Doesn't grow in a lab.
Doesn't grow in a lab. My menu was in front of it, so it spoilt it, but I can see it now. Brilliant. All right, Britta. I'm going to talk to the attendees about next week's webinar. While I do that, do you want to get your presentation ready, and then I'll be back shortly? Okay.
All right.
Okay. See you in a minute. Okay, next week, I know it's Food Safety Fridays, but next week we're having the webinar on Wednesday, the 1st of April, April Fool's Day. I hope that's not an omen. The reason for that is next Friday is Good Friday, so that's a holiday for a lot of people. So we thought we'd move it to Wednesday. So please do remember that. Also, in addition, in the UK, daylight, the hours change basically. We go from GMT to BST. So the clocks go forward 1 hour. I'll still be doing it at 3 o'clock. It doesn't make any difference to me. But I may be speaking to myself unless you check your time zone. So we'll send an email out to make sure we tie up all the times. But please do remember, it's next Wednesday, the 1st of April. That's just for 1 week. Okay. Yeah, next week we've got Dick Smith and Ruby Okoa from Trace Analytics, who are our kind sponsors. And they're going to be talking about navigating the path to food-grade compressed air quality. It's a different one next week because we've got co-presenters, so we've not done that before. Almost every week we're doing something new. We're actually doing some new things today. Britta's really pushing the boundaries and with audience participation today, so you'll all be involved. So that's new, so we're looking forward to that. So remember to register. You need to register for the webinars. Even if you're not going to attend live, it's important you register to get the video recording of the webinar, the slides, and the certificate. Okay, so I can see Britta's ready now. So I'll head over and hand you over to Britta. So I'll be back for the Q&A later. Okay, thank you. Right, Britta, away you go.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Simon. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and really appreciate the sponsors for hosting the webinar as well. So thanks very much for everybody who signed in. I look forward to this opportunity to share with you some ideas that I have and that other people have about ways to make your food safety training stick. What I first want to do is I want to focus on or give you an idea of where I've come from and let you know just a little bit about my background and what I'm doing now. So I did my undergrad in dairy science at the University of Guelph, And from there, I worked in industry. I worked in inspection with the Ontario government. I worked in farm and plant inspection. And then while I was in industry, I realized how much I enjoyed training and working, sharing information with people and helping them learn. So I went from industry to the university, or what's now the University of Guelph's Kemptville campus, but Kemptville College. And I was taught milk quality and processing. Then I taught communications and English, and so I sort of went away from the food science industry kind of area and went into leadership and organization development and communications and strengthening the people's skills and the training side of things. More recently, then, I went back and I just finished a PhD in food safety management systems, and that combining my food science background and my work in the training and management sciences. So, and I started my own consulting business, and I help companies improve their food safety culture and their bottom lines by working with executives in strategic management, by coaching in food safety and quality professionals, and by engaging and training employees so that they're actually doing what it is that they were being asked to do. So just leading into the presentation, what the description is, it says we're going to focus on 3 areas: the learners, the training, and the environment. But within those 3 areas, there's also the presentation, the preparation, the presentation, and the follow-up. And these are another 3 areas. So depending on how you might look at it, you might look at these 3 or the other 3. But they're all important. And in fact, though, what some people have said is that what you do before and after a training is more important than what you do during a training. And just to help you in terms of webinar structure, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to go through the 3 areas. I'm going to focusing on the preparation, presentation, and follow-up. And in each of these areas, I'm looking at the learners, the training, and environment. So if you're going to want to take notes in some way, then this would be a way to structure your note-taking. So just I wanted to give you a heads up on that. So the first section is, the first focus is on planning. And this is really what it is that you need to do to prepare for an effective training session. So what I'd like you to do is ask yourself, what is one thing that I consider when planning a training session? And just take a moment and jot it down on a piece of paper. And so what is one thing I consider when planning a training session? And I'd like you to type that answer into your chat box, because this is the interactive part. And one of the things I'm going to do with this information after is Simon is going to send it to me, and I'll compile it, and we'll send that out to you and let people know what they do to prepare just the whole group. So this is like doing a group setting on webinar.
Okay, so please everybody type into the chat box the answer to that question. What is the one thing I consider when planning a training session? And that's just one thing. So if you can type that in. Okay, we're getting a lot, and it's scrolling fast. And I'll just read some out to you. Audience. Here are some audience: training objective, the time, the audience again, audience, time, who is going to listen and what I want them to learn, the subject, audience, target audience, the audience, language understanding, the goal. Wow, a lot of typing in. So,
yep.
The food safety knowledge, the level of knowledge, the materials, study level of the attendees. So there is a focus on attendees and the audience there, I would say, Britta. If I had to, obviously we're going to calculate these scientifically later, but I would say it's the majority are sort of saying the audience, and yeah, and then you've got the goal and maybe the level of education of the audience and things like that. Okay, is that
excellent? This is great. These are great answers, and so when we're coming back to then this, so exactly. So one of the things to do if you're focusing on your learners is, as many of you have mentioned, that you need to know your audience. And in the food industry, literacy levels and language barriers are really important things to consider. Of course, depending on your own operation, that may or may not be as much of a problem. But it is important to consider, because if your operation has low literacy levels and or high language barriers, then whatever you're writing or speaking could be, your English could be no better than Greek to somebody. Unless, of course, they are Greek, in which case it's a different story. But so that's really key, and that's important. And as many of you have mentioned. So as I was explaining, adult learners are not the same. They're different from children. And so we want to, when we're working with adult learners, is we want to focus on their needs, and not think of training in when we were going to school. In fact, some people may have had issues with their own schooling, so that brings back bad memories. So we want to help them by making training relevant. And that was mentioned in some of the comments that were coming up. So we want to make the training relevant to the adult learners, because they'll be more engaged, they'll be more interested, because it makes sense to them. Because their learning will be right. They'll be focused on learning what it is that they need to learn and why they need to learn it. So clearly define the training goals, and tell the learners why it is that they're learning, why you're focusing on this particular aspect for their learning, because that helps them to realize that it's not just a wasted effort of their time. Give them responsibility for active learning, and that's and one way to do that is to engage them. So as an example, what we just did in the interaction there, and you gave feedback. So I've given you responsibility for actively participating in the learning, and your thoughts and ideas have come up that they're going to be learning the information, because that helps them understand why it's important for them, and they'll be more consciously engaged. So it's about engaging their brain. Give them responsibility for active learning, and we did that by getting you actively involved and giving input, because that input then helps your brain recognize the information. It helps you to engage in what's going on, and then you're participating in connecting with the others, because you can see their responses. And building on your experiences by doing this as well. And gaining your input then gives you confidence in what's coming on. I'm also considering your motivation. The WIIFM radio station is the what's in it for me. So when I'm tuned into something that is relevant to me, then I'm going to be much more motivated to be focusing on it. If I'm doing it for somebody else, then I may not be quite as focused and motivated. So what's in it for me is really important. And then it's one of the things that people talk about is learning styles, and they say, oh well, I'm a visual learner, I'm an audio learner, and the different types of learners. But what's important is that you address all learning styles, because you're going to have a mix of people. And so in some ways you don't even need to worry about what learning styles are. You just need to focus on trying to address everything and give variety while you're doing the training. So in your training preparation, then this is the second part of your preparation. And as many of you mentioned, you want to know what your goal is, what your training purpose is. What you want to think about is, or what you want to ask yourself is, what do I want people to think, feel, and or do by the end of the training? And so, because we're really focused on shifting information in their brain, so it really becomes a brain thing, not just a teaching or a training thing. You're trying to influence what's going on in their brains. So your training purpose has to be behavior change, because if you're wanting to give knowledge, then knowledge is fine if you're in an academic setting and you're trying to know what 1 + 1 is so that you can do more complex calculations later. But in a training session, your main purpose is behavior change. And so you need to do things so that you're training will influence that in the end. So, and as many of you mentioned too, you mentioned time and what you're going to cover and things like that. So when planning your approach, you want to focus on how much time do I have? What kind of information can I cover in the time that I have? What order makes sense? Because you want to make sure that things follow in a logical order to help with the learning. Because people will, if it's jumbled, then people aren't able to make links. Because adults will look for patterns, or our brains are trained to look for patterns. And if there's a good order, then that will help us to recognize what the patterns are. And how will my plan fit with adult learning principles that I mentioned earlier section? So you want to try to involve people, engage them, and generate interest and activity by doing things that cover the different learning styles. Another way that will help people learn and remember information is to create an emotional connection with something. And so many people will start doing longer presentations. They'll start with a story. And so by starting with a story, that helps people to imagine things, and then that imagination will help people create an emotional connection to the content and the topic. And so in your planning your approach, essentially what you're doing is every question you ask, everything that you're doing, you should be asking yourself, how will what I am doing improve learning? If you're doing something, whatever you're doing needs to improve learning, otherwise you need to wonder why it is that you're doing that. And then the environment, and in preparation, you want to be aware of what your environment is going to be like. So you want to be aware of your room, what's going on in your room. Do you have a separate training room, or are you in a lunch room that's subjected to people coming in and out? Not everybody has a facility that has a special room. Sometimes your equipment may be not quite as technologically advanced, so you have to do some basic sort of training. When I was working in West Africa and giving presentations in East Africa, one of the things that I always had to be aware of whether the electricity was going to go out. So I always had to have a backup plan in case the overhead projector lamp went out, and so I was able to do the presentation just against the wall with flip chart papers and things. And so then, of course, your resources and how much money you have available, and what kinds of, whether you have videos that you can use, or what other kind of training materials you can use. So this is all part of the preparation that you do before the training. And then comes the training. This is when you're actually going to be in the room with your people. And so what do you do then next? What I like to do now is I'd like to do a poll, and Simon's got a poll for you, and the question is, do you use clicker technology in your training sessions? So Simon, over to you.
Yeah. So I'm just setting that poll live now in the sidebar. So if attendees can go to the sidebar and to the poll tab, you should be able to see I got to quit touching my mouse, sorry. Oh, okay. You should be able to, attendees, you should be able to see in the poll tab on the right-hand side the question, do you use clicker technology in your training sessions? Yes, no, or what is clicker technology? And I'm in the third, I'm going to actually answer the poll and say what is clicker technology, because I really don't know. I can have a guess, but I don't actually know for sure. So I'm going to vote. Can you all please vote? And then I think we're going to pick this up later in your presentation, aren't we?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So you guys keep voting, and we'll continue on with the presentation. We'll bring this back in when we come to that part about when we're discussing that. So the presentation then, so when you're working on the presentation, you want to, and focusing on the learners, and you're giving your presentation and the approach that you're learning that you're using in the presentation, that's based on what you developed in the preparation stage. And in this, what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep learners interested by keeping them active and engaged. And this is really important. It's important that as much as possible you help to get people thinking, because when they're thinking, that's when their brain is going to be able to shift that new information and take that new information in and actually make it make sense. So by keeping their brains working, you're helping the learning, and that's absolutely critical in especially with adults. With young children, there's a different brain chemistry that goes on, and basically they absorb so much information very quickly, and our brains change when we become adults. By shifting into the interested, engaged, and active stage, we're keeping them interested and active. So now, hopefully everybody's finished their poll. The next question that I have is, I'd like you to type into their chat box, ask yourself the question, what is one activity or technique I have used to keep learners' attention? So if you could think about that, one activity or technique that I have used to keep learners' attention, and type that into your chat box. And when you type that in, I'll take notes as they fly by. Your responses start coming in. They go really quickly. So.
You'll have to be really quick, Britta. You'll have to get up early in the morning to do that. But we will capture all these and compile them, won't we, at the end anyway? So, but please,
So go ahead. Sorry, Simon. Go ahead.
Yes. So please, attendees, type in the answer to the question: what is one activity or technique I have used to keep learners' attention? Humour, role play, quiz, storytelling, asking questions, use real life examples, asking questions, ask the audience, storytelling, ask clip art, breakout, shocking story, quiz, humour, sarcasm, use props, questions, interactive conversation, more graphics, less words. Wow. Video activity, let them stand up, goofy pictures, real life scenarios, interactive discussions, videos, questions and answers to ensure they stick, humour and pictures, humour.
Yeah, so these are great. Yeah, these are great ideas, great activities and techniques that you've used. So humor, role-playing stories, games, interactive discussions.
We've got coffee there, Britta. Is it good?
Oh, we've got coffee. Cool room temperatures. Yeah. Yes, that's right. If they're pornography, you got to be careful with that because you can get into harassment charges on that. I just caution you on that. Ice cream.
That's Javier, our resident joker. He likes to keep the troops entertained. I've just served him some ice cream, so he should really be quiet.
Yeah, there we go. So the food is a way to get people actually coming to the activity, and keeping the temperature cool, that actually comes into a later spot. So yes, to keep learners' attention, there are a number of really great ideas on that you've got. And so one of the things when we're looking at adult learning is we look at experiential learning. And if you know of Kolb was a researcher. He had 4 stages of adult learning, but sometimes it's easier to put it into 3 stages instead, because 2 of Kolb's stages can kind of combine depending on how you perceive things. So one is the learning activity, the second is the learner's response, and the third is the application of learning. And so in the learning activity, that's the activity that perhaps you've designed. You may have an activity that you've designed that will help people learn the information, and then the next, or you're giving them the information, that learning activity. So whatever it is that they're doing, whether they're doing an interactive game or whether they're doing discussions, you're getting them to think about the content of the information that you'd like them to learn. And then the next stage, which is a really important one, is the learner's response. And in this learner's response, what it is that you're wanting to do is you're wanting to give the learners a chance to think about what that information means to them, because it's this reflection of the information that's going to help them put it into their brain in a different way than if they're just getting information, and then going back out to work. So you've got to give them information and then give them time to think about it and how it might apply to them in their own setting. And this is thinking about how it might apply before we do the application of learning. So that's the third stage, is the application of learning. And the application of learning can take place actually on the work site or in a training session. What we're actually doing is we're giving them a chance to use the information in the training session to help reinforce the information that they learned during the learning activity. So that would ideally be the way you do it, or if the application of learning may be more practical actually out in the workplace, then there needs to be immediate follow-up after that so that they know that they're doing the things right. So that's really important. So in experiential learning, these three areas: learning activity, learner's response, and the application of learning. So what I'm doing is, in this, we're doing the learning activity. I'm having you think about things, giving you information, having you think about things by doing the response, and the application of learning is we're discussing it afterwards, and hopefully you're going to be able to then apply this later. So it doesn't quite work when we're doing a webinar. It doesn't quite work quite as easily as when we're in a training session. So then what we have here now is this is just a summary then of what ways to get people thinking and reflecting. Because as I mentioned, thinking and reflecting is the really important part of that learner's response. So discussions were mentioned. There are some interactive discussions, some different activities that were mentioned. Some role play is a way to do active application of learning. Some games. Those could be games that be done before, or they could be games done afterwards to help the information be assimilated. And one thing to remember, that sometimes the learning activity could be similar to the application of learning. Just it depends on how you choose to set it up. So you can do a game at the start, then do a learner's response, and then apply the learning. You could do the application of learning could be done in a game setting. I'm just giving games as an example. And so that was just how that fit into the getting people thinking and reflecting. So the think, pair, and share is if you've got people who are uncomfortable working with talking with each other, if you get them to think about things and then just talk to their neighbor and say something to their neighbor, and then have that information then shared with the whole group, that gets people. That's done in classroom settings sometimes when you've got a large classroom. Just think about something, pair with your neighbor, and then share with the larger group. And if you do that, that could take, depending on how you do it, it could take 10 to 15 minutes for every time to do a think, pair, and share, depending on how complex what it is you're asking them to think about. Buzz groups would be, instead of just two people, buzz groups could be 3 to 5 to 6 groups of people talking about the topic, and then reporting back, discussing amongst themselves, and then reporting back to the whole group. And the reporting back to the whole group is important so that people then will get their information heard, and then as a whole group, then you're discussing the information, you're getting feedback from everybody in the whole audience when you're doing the buzz groups. There are many others that you mentioned, and the clicker systems. So what about the clicker systems? Was the poll working?
It was, yes. I've got
what
the
do we
results.
got for the clicker systems? And we'll hear a poll, and then we'll go from there.
I'm pleased to announce that the question, do you use clicker technology in your training sessions? The result is yes, 17%, no, 35%, and what is clicker technology, 48%. So an overwhelming number of people either don't know what it is or don't use it.
Okay, well that's okay. So that I really appreciate this, because we really didn't have an understanding of how many operations are using clicker technology. Not that many, and so what clicker technology is it's a system that that's set up with a presentation of sorts. And so there's a technical box that will receive information, and if you've got 10 people in the room, then each person in the room has a little it's like a machine that you use for wireless television or wireless television system. You can code the answer in. So on a screen or in a video that you've got that you've showed, then there will maybe a question, and when that question comes up, then you ask the audience members to each use their own little clicker pad to give the response. So let's say it's a multiple choice response, A, B, C, D, and you ask the people then, is the correct answer A, B, C, or D? And then they would use their little clicker pad, and they would click on A or B or C or D, whatever their answer is. They click on that answer, and that answer then is transmitted to the box. The techno box then will compile the information just like was done with this poll. And so you're doing it sort of through the internet. But so in a similar way that we're doing with this poll, this clicker system is done in a classroom setting. It can be done with 500, 1,000 people in a conference room, or it can be done with 10 people in a training room. And that helps people to engage. They know that they're going to be tested on the information. So the video is shown, the answers are typed in, and you know right away whether people are getting the correct information, whether they've understood the information that was presented, because you can show the responses. The responses can be shown up on the screen. So I just So just checking some of the lines. So there are some approaches to use smartphones and other kinds of things, but the clickers you can purchase them and set them up using PowerPoint, using a PowerPoint system, and so this box is probably what makes it expensive, and the company that does the systems that I'm aware of that does the clicker technology for food companies, they actually have pre-made training, and so it connects up their clickers connect up with their training. But you can do your own, and you can create your own PowerPoint presentation if you've got the technology to do that. So it doesn't have to be quite as expensive as if you engage in a large company that provides the training as well as the technology. So that is and it's one way to just keep track of training and the actual knowledge that people have gained, because you're using it. You don't have to use a test in writing. Sometimes people's writing skills aren't, going back to the learner, sometimes their literacy levels or their language levels aren't strong enough. Okay, so the environment was key. So when the people are in the learning room, it's important that you've got in a setting that enables interaction and prevents distractions, and is comfortable enough, because if people are too cold, I know one of the comments was, how do you keep people's attention? You keep the room cool. Well, if it's too cold, then that's a problem. But if it's too warm, then people may fall asleep. So it's got to be comfortable enough so that they're not focused and they're not distracted by some issues or discomfort. You want to enable interaction. So having a lecture format is with chairs all facing the room is not as conducive to training as if you had a group setting and around in circles, around in tables, depending on the number of people that you have in your training. And again, prevent distractions. So yeah, so as I was saying, that the follow-up is the third section that you need to do. And as I mentioned before, that sometimes some people think that the preparation and the follow-up are more important than the training itself. When you've done the training, then if you set people off to do their activities, sometimes they may have interpreted things differently, and so they're going off on a different path than the path that you've tried to set in your training. So So a question again for interactive participation is for you to ask yourself, what is one thing that I have done to support learners and to keep them on the right path after training? So what's one thing that you do to do that? So if you can type your response in the chat box. So Simon, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So the question is, what is the one thing that I have done to support learners and keep them on the right path after training? So what do you do? The one thing, please type it in now. They should start to come through in a few seconds. I was just saying to them, one of the things, you know, I was asking before, Britta, about the different things you do, and people were typing in bribes, snacks, candy bars, you know, chocolates. One person typed in songs. That's a new one to me. I've been involved with all sorts of training, but singing songs in training. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, songs are a great way to help people remember, because putting it into a different sort of format, then you can, it's like a poem or something, and by putting it into music, that helps them to, it helps the brain remember things.
Yeah, it breaks down barriers, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm seeing here, Britta, audits, monitoring, tests, quiz, follow-up audits, observation of people probably doing what they've been trained to do, follow-up interviews, supervisor verification, regular assessments, training reviews, training evaluation, on the spot check-in. Yeah, continued training, observation, yeah. Repeat sessions. So yeah, audits, observation, monitoring, tests. They're the sort of things we're getting. Observation.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Excellent. Like excellent ideas, and some of these ideas actually are what I would do in the training at the end of the training. So if I'm wanting to know immediately whether people have learned the information, I'll actually ask questions at the end of the training. So it's part of the training. It's part and parcel of my training implementation of the training. So an evaluation right then and there. What people took away. What's the key message from that training? And one thing that I forgot to mention was, if you have one goal or one objective of what it is you like people to take away from the training, it's better than having 5 or 6, because if there's one thing you want people to learn, they know what it is they need to focus on when they leave the training session. If there are too many things that they've learned, they're not sure what it is that they need to focus on. So help learners by giving them one thing at a time to focus on. Then when they go out into the workplace, then they can focus on that one thing and doing that one thing really well. So then when we're doing a follow-up, one of the things we want to do is we want to motivate them. We want to reinforce the learning in the workplace, and we want to motivate them in a way so that they're going to follow what it was, that they're going to do what it was that they were trained to do. Because as we go back to the beginning, I said that the purpose of the training is behavior change. You want to change in behavior to happen, and so you need a motivation to help them change that behavior by doing some sort of reinforcement. If we think about it in terms of the Army, then that might be perceived as a negative reinforcement, because you say, oh, I caught this person doing something wrong, I trained them to do that, and let me tell them that they're doing it wrong. And that may not be the best way to do it. In fact, for adults, that's likely the worst way to do it, because you want adults to save face. You don't want to embarrass them in any way, if at all possible. If you're going to do any sort of reprimanding, you need to do that in private, so that they're not embarrassed in front of their peers. That's very, very, very demotivating, and they're not going to be able to, they're not going to be willing to make things work for you if you've got a situation like that. So one of the better ways to do this is to think about positive reinforcement. What is it that I can do that I can track them doing things right? Instead of tracking violations, I want to keep track of what it is they're doing right. When they're doing something the way they were trained to do it, I want to praise them. I want to motivate them by giving them positive reinforcement. I want to recognize their efforts. So some people mention that they get that they'll give people a reward of some sort or other for doing what it was that they learned. You want to engage them and perhaps even ask them for ideas about how to improve the situation. And that they've, so if you train them to do something and they're not able to do it for some reason or other, one example, a hand washing example, that seemed to be the easiest one to pick, is you've trained them to wash their hands, but they're not washing their hands, and then you find out that the reason they're not washing their hands is because there's no paper towels to dry them. Well, okay, we get their input to say, well, you're learning why it is that they're not doing things. So by engaging them and getting feedback from them, that could help to reinforce the information later. Effective coaching is important, and if you think about it in terms of sports teams, I mean, you can have sports teams and they can get, their teams can get told off and saying, look, you're not doing things, but when you've got a really good coach, you're also having the coach say, getting people to row together, to use a rowing analogy. The teams are all pulling together. They're doing things for the betterment of the team, and the coaching is focused on that, to identify ways to help people to feel a part of the whole big picture and look to what the impact is on what their work is. Look at the bigger picture impact of their work on the outcome of the products that they're producing. And effective coaching can help get them to see the big picture, and can help them to do a better job of understanding the importance of their roles. Then it goes back into the motivation, recognition, and engagement part, that effective coaching will do that. And then the training follow-up is the third part of this third section. And in your doing the training follow-up, what you're wanting to look at is a continuous improvement of the training that you're giving itself. And so how could you do things differently in your future training so that you can improve the learning experience? And in continuous improvement in the food safety processes is what it is that you could do in the operations area to help the food safety processes improve. Because if they're not doing things because you've not got the system set up properly, if there are ways to improve the whole system in the food safety in the manufacturing setting or the production setting, you get feedback from them, you make those improvements, then that can actually help them implement the training. So you can tell them that they need to do X, but if they're not provided with the resources and the material and the support to do X, or the time to do X, then they can't do it, and so they're doing what they were doing before in the past. And so that's why with training, with the follow-up and training, it's really is really important that you think about how you can do a continuous improvement in that. And in the environment, there's something that you can do also in the environment, and I sort of touched on that in that food safety processes. In the environment, in the workplace setting, you're requiring that the behavior, that they do a behavior change. You're wanting to reduce the violations of things, and so one way, instead of looking at violations, I can say, well, what are they doing right? And I want that behavior change. I want to encourage the behavior that I've tried to train in the training session. And in order to help them and support these adults in this change, then I can provide things like workplace aids. There were observation with some of the things that we talked about in doing the behavior, doing the very back at the beginning of this, when people were asked what they do to support it, doing audits, doing observations. And so you're watching what's going on, and you're wanting to require that behavior change, watch what's going on. But while you're watching, then see if there are things that could be different so that you've got to make sure that there are appropriate equipment and conditions in the workplace so that they can do those things. Workplace aids, so I'm going backwards on my slides here, so my points. So workplace aids, perhaps you have signs placed in certain areas so that it helps people to remember that this is what it is that they need to do. A hypothetical example might be if there's an area where they need to take temperatures of something, then if there's a sign in that particular area where they've got the temperature that needs to be met, and here's the critical control point for the temperature, then that's right on the wall. They know that that's the temperature they need to check for every time. And so that would be a workplace aid. The hand washing signs in all the washrooms are another example of workplace aids that are used to, and these are resources that support the behavior change that you're asking people to make. So you're giving them a reminder of what it is that you've trained them to do. And then in summary, what I've done is I've already looked at the quality wheel. Some of you may be a quality specialist or taken training in quality, and Deming, I think it's Deming, who has this quality wheel, the plan, do, check, act. And what I've done is I've applied this quality wheel to training. So we think about the quality of training. So in the planning, then what you're looking at is as you guys have mentioned and we brought forward, you want to look at who is your audience and all the things, the situations and issues around your audience and how to best get that information across. What it is that you want to do. Again, you want to do things that will influence behavior change. How are you going to implement that? And remembering also that less is more. It's better to have several shorter training sessions with fewer key points that you want them to remember than to have one bigger training session and give them 5 things to remember and they maybe don't remember anything but 1. So you're better to have shorter training sessions and focus on one behavior change at a time. Then the do is what you're doing during the training. So do what you plan to do, and sometimes you need to adjust. Just as here we are in the video, this Google Hangouts system, and we get hung up. Well, it's just one of those situations. You just need to be aware that you may have technical difficulties. You may have other sorts of difficulties. So, you may even have a fire drill or something, or maybe not even a fire drill, some other sort of emergency that means that you have to cut it short. So you have to adjust as needed, and then rejig when you can get back to it. Then the check, and the check is the during and after, and a number of you mentioned that when you talked about the follow-up, that you're assessing the outcome, you're doing tests, you're doing verification types of things. You can assess the training results, and assess the training results during the training, and also assess the training results, a week, 2 weeks, a month after the training. So there are different times that you check the results of the training, and you can assess the training process. As I mentioned, you want to evaluate how effective the training process was, what you want to stop doing, what you want to start doing, what you want to keep doing that you've done in the training process. Ways to, again, that's a continuous improvement side of things. And then the act part of this quality wheel is what you're going to do after the training. What follow-up are you going to do to support the behavior change, and then also identify how you're going to improve future training to make it so that the future training, the whole thing of future training, the preparation, the implementation, and the follow-up to help training stick. And so what I'm going to ask you to do here now is, I'd like you to do a personal application thing. So again, I'm asking you to think and consider what you would do. Ask yourself, what am I going to do differently in the next 3 months as a result of this webinar? So is there one thing that you've picked up from this webinar that you will be able to apply in your situation? So think about that and type that in the chat box.
Okay, while they're typing that in, Britta, I'll just read a few comments out because they've been coming through. Yahia said, training is just a start step. That's just the start, and basically she has he has an open door policy that encourages further interaction. So it's just a start step. Do you concur with that?
Yes, because it's training. Well, training is a start of behavior change. I mean, we need to. Whenever I take any sort of training, the reason I'm doing the training myself, if I'm taking training, is I'm wanting to learn something, and if I'm wanting to learn it, then I'm wanting to understand what it is that I can do with the information. So there are models of training. And knowledge leads to attitude change leads to behavior change. Well, that doesn't necessarily follow. I can have knowledge, but I don't necessarily make that into a behavior change. So when I learn something, the purpose of my learning is say, well, what can I gain? How can I use this information to improve what it is I'm doing, to improve my personal situation, to move my professional situation? And so that's how absolutely that statement is right. Training is just a start. So I'm learning information, but I really wanted to use that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, coming through a lot is about the follow-up. Some on the planning, but a lot on the follow-up and especially positive reinforcement. And one comment that I quite liked was talk with, not to learners.
Yeah.
So more of a, not a teaching down, more of a conversation, a two-way conversation that perhaps gets to understand their constraints and problems as well, and perhaps reasons why they can't exhibit that behavior or do that thing.
Great, excellent, yes. And and that's so important. And the other thing is that it may take time if you haven't had training that's where you've engaged people. It may take time for people to feel comfortable to share, just because they're saying, whoa, what's going on here? How come this is so different? And it's so out of their comfort zone. So you're wanting to do a little bit. You're wanting to sort of push the envelope a little bit. So you may have to introduce it slowly, just so that they don't think that because again, it's about safety for them. They don't want to do something. They don't want to be in a training that's going to put them in an unsafe situation. They don't want to say something if they think that they're going to embarrass themselves. And so you want to always help learners keep face. You want to always help them so that they're not going to be put into an embarrassing situation, what they might see as an embarrassing situation. You want to always respect them and give them credit for the education that they may have, especially in Canada, and I imagine in the United States as well. We have immigrants working in the food industry, and they've come from other countries, and they're highly educated in their other countries, but because of language barriers, they're not able to get jobs in the high skilled area where they were in their own country. And so we've got really smart people working in production settings, and if we can help to give them the opportunity to think and use their minds, then we can really motivate them and help them in a number of different ways, and then help our companies also by doing that.
Yeah, brilliant. We've run over the hour mark, and I know a lot of attendees sort of have commitments.
Yes. So
we've got through what we.
That's right. That's the last slide. Is just the experiential learning. The webinar. The activity was the webinars. The response was interaction and thinking, and the application was your plan of action. So that's the last slide.
So this webinar, then, am I right in saying that this webinar has been an example of what you've been teaching? Am I explaining that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. We've been actually, we've actually experienced what we want attendees training to experience. And I think it's been brilliant. It's what we're going to do is I'll leave the chat open, and if attendees want to ask actual specific questions of Britta, I'll capture all those, and when we compile everything, perhaps you'll answer some of those and we can follow up with that rather than doing it now. Would that be okay, Britta?
That would be fine with me. We can respond them. And I saw that there's a private question about using computer technology and going sort of online training. And so, but in response to that, I think that would be a question that should be answered to the whole group as well. Yeah. But just a quick answer to that. Many companies are wanting to go to online training because it can be done anytime, and in some cases it's less expensive once you get the costs of the training program, and it could easily cost $50,000, $20,000, or $50,000 to do an online or more to do an online training program. But once you've got that training program, then you just have people using that. The advantages and disadvantages of that are that when you've got people using computerized training, they've really got to be self-motivated, and for some people it's hard for them to get self-motivated. They can be motivated because they're working, it's required for their job, but the other thing is, though, it can be effective because you can implement activities within the training that gives them the chance to engage in the information. In fact, I did a food handler training with Food Banks Canada, and one of the things that we did was, just as an example, was for how to put things in a refrigerator, and so I had the ready-to-eat stuff. They had to actually put it on the top shelf of the refrigerator, and the things that had to be cooked the longest were on the bottom shelf of the refrigerator. They had to actually use the mouse and move those items to the refrigerator in the proper order in order to do that interaction. So they had to think about the temperature, and they had to then apply it in that setting. So that's how it can work in an online setting. There are advantages and disadvantages, and some people like it and some people don't, and so and sometimes it's really a company decision to where we're going to go with that.
Yeah, and I suppose it's how you do follow up on that as well, the planning and making sure it's relevant, etc., and following up, and not just sort of outsourcing it and taking the easy route to online, sitting someone in front of a computer.
That's right, because as I said in the middle part, the purpose of the training is behavior change, and knowledge doesn't equal behavior change.
Yeah, brilliant. On that, can you stop sharing now, Britta?
I can.
On that, we'll conclude it. If anybody wants to type in a question for Britta, that's fine. Apart from that, I just want to say, Britta, that was absolutely fantastic. Despite the technical glitches, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It was a great session, and the comments that have been coming in absolutely complimentary. So that's down to you, and the way you've set this out. It's a very clever way of doing it, and it worked very well. The interaction. And you can see that from the comments. So on behalf of the IFSQN, I know you're coming back later in the year. You've got some more webinars to do for us.
Yes, in May, the end of May, on food safety culture.
Brilliant. Can't wait for that already. So on behalf of the IFSQN and all attendees today, I just want to say thanks very much, and we can't wait to have you back again. So have a great weekend, Britta, and take care.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity, Simon.
Brilliant. All right, and I'll follow up with all the information to you. I'll capture all the comments. Okay?
All right. Excellent. Thank you.